obviously the song that kind of catapulted you to recognition was 1950, and well, there's multiple things about that song. But first, it was based on a book, I believe. I wrote the Price of Salt, I think. So, what instigated that song?
Well, it's also about a breakup, but it's about the same breakup. But it's I was reading a lot of gay literature, and there was one book, The Price of Salt, that really stuck with me because it's a beautiful story. And I think what I loved about it was it took place in the 50s, and the way that queer people were allowed to be public was so censored, and it was all about body language, and it was all about this kind of icy interaction because you had to hide yourself. And so I was, interested in the parallel between the metaphor of 1950 being how queer love looks in public. And how it's very similar to like having a really cold relationship or really distant.
Right.
So I love that visual, like playing 1950 being, a metaphor for having someone be icy towards you.
Because one thing that I found interesting about it was, I don't know why, but it kind of, I don't know the right word, but it conjured up this idea of identity or it's difficult. I had to think for some reason about the Harlem Renaissance.
Yeah.
Because I thought, well, that was a period of time where certain art was really prominent for a certain group of people.
Right,
and
black art was really prominent,
exactly.
but at the same time it was a culture of oppression.
Right.
And I think that's what's interesting about disenfranchised or oppressed communities is that we thrive when there is something against us because we're used to fighting our way out of oppression. I think gay people, the gay art that I find really beautiful comes out of a period of sadness. It's like I'm very invested in drag culture and the ballroom scene, and that was a direct result of the AIDS epidemic and people finding happiness and solace within their communities during a time period that was so dark. The 50s is another one. It's like gay people were making art. There was a lot of art. There was the beat poets. There was Patricia Highsmith writing The Price of Salt. And yet it was so savage. It was so evil towards gay people, right. Harlem Renaissance is a very similar thing. I think, the queer community is really, really good at taking it with a smile and moving past the hard times and figuring out a way to find happiness and in sadness.
With that in mind, in terms of the political situation in America, you say you do it with a smile, but I can imagine that can be quite tough.
It's very tough. I think that, obviously I have an easier life than most of the queer people in America. I grew up in New York and I live in LA. I don't experience what it's like to be gay in a city that doesn't accept me, a city that voted against me. Like, I could have been from a city that voted entirely against gay marriage, but I wasn't, know? And I think that it's very challenging, but the best thing that we can do is to keep making our art because it truly has more of a power than anyone in our office. Like, the queer art has an ability to infiltrate the minds and the thoughts of a generation of people, and who doesn't have that power? Fucking Donald Trump. Like, Donald Trump does not have any power. Right. Like, this fucker is like, oh God, he's such a dick. But it's like, he really, honestly, that the hate, it just doesn't, it isn't as motivating. You know what I mean? Like, we've seen it historically. It's like there's these fucked up assholes who are running our country, but they never seem to last. Because there's so much going against him right now. There's all these gay people, there's all these black people, there's all these trans people, and we're all fighting against him. And I have a lot of hope. You have to have hope. You can't just be sad. It's like you have to have hope.
Fair enough, that makes sense.
You can't just dwell in the sadness. That's not what we're about.
And then another thing I found interesting about that song is that I think this tells you kind of in the type of culture we live. But Harry Styles from One Direction then tweets one line and it blows up in a way.
Yeah, he's such a sweet pea. That was so kind.
But for you, because you're a young person as well, I don't know how involved in social media you are, but how have you seen that kind of, how has that element been for you in terms of...
Social media?
Yeah, in terms of what we talked about earlier as well, in terms of representation.
Well, I think that social media is really interesting because it's really it's a vessel to show people as much as you want to show. And I think that what the challenge has been in social media is that there's so many artists who perfect their image on social media, and that's how they come across to their fans. It's this like, it's an image rather than a person. And I think that that's really dope, and that's like one way to do it. But there's also this other lane that you can go in, which I feel like I'm in, which is like, I just make a fucking joke out of it. Because it's stupid. It's absolutely fucking stupid. It's like social media is stupid, but it's super fun to make a joke out of it, and it's as fun as you make it. You know what I mean? And I think that, at least for me, the way I feel like I've been able to wrap my head around it is, as long as I'm making a joke and making a gag and having a laugh, I'm fine.
Not taking it too seriously.
Can't take it seriously. It's very, very scary when you take it seriously. It's very dark. People are dark on the internet. They are mean, and they come for you. And it's like, to a certain point, it's like, am I gonna look at what some fucking person sitting on their keyboard, like, typing some nasty shit? Like, no, like, I don't give a shit about that.
Because that's the thing. As you become a public figure in a way, as an artist, then that becomes an element. For me, it doesn't matter because nobody has to say about me. Right.
Well, that's the thing is, like, I think people are hungry for authenticity, and they're really hungry for real people. And we've gotten past this idea that our pop stars have to be polished, and they have to be perfect and sit in this box, you know, and look a certain way and act a certain way and fuck certain people. It's like we don't need that anymore. People are bored. We're bored of that shit. So it's the perfect time to really be yourself on the internet, because it is a part of our culture, and it's a part of how we interact with each other, you know?
Yeah, but it sounds like sound advice to kind of not take it too
Just don't read those comments, baby girl. Don't read them comments. Those comments get scary.
And then, well, we talked about the EP, and can I assume that this is kind of the precursor to a full LP?
Yeah, it's written.
Okay, so it's done.
Yeah, I'm working on it, but it's written. Okay.
Without revealing too much, then, what do you notice about the new songs in comparison to
They sound grown up.
Okay.
They sound like the next step. I'm so excited about it. It's really like, I wrote it throughout the year as I was releasing music. So I was writing it as I was still releasing music, and I think that it feels like a finished thought, and it explores a variety of different sounds and production elements and themes that I'm interested in. It's a lot about drag and gender. Okay. I thought it'd be interesting because, you know, the first EP was so personal and so about me. This one, the LP, I explore more some of the larger themes of my community and other, you know, I try to kind of open up the scope a little bit. It's not about a breakup, so.
No, it's interesting because, well, I mentioned the word representation earlier, and then I imagine, because I can't remember who it was. I think it was Anna Calvi who I was talking to, and she said when she was growing up, there were almost no artists that represented kind of where she came from, her view. So for you, is that important to kind of show that in your art that is a part of life as well?
It has to be, because when you don't see people who look like you, it's hard to, there's nothing to grasp onto. And I felt that same way. It's like I was so inundated with straight representation, straight relationships, straight love, straight musicians. Right. And it was hard for me as a young gay kid to even conceptualize that there could be a gay pop star, because I didn't have anybody who looked like me. And so now it's essential for me to be unapologetic about who I am, because it's how people who aren't oppressed interact with the world constantly, right? And it's not fair for straight people to be able to do all this shit, and gay people, it's just not fair. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, I don't ever want to hide a part of myself.
Was it, this might be too personal, but was there a turning point for you? Where you got this realization where I'm not gonna
I was
hide.
so young. I just knew. The minute I started writing songs with like female pronouns, I was just like, this is, I didn't even think about it at first. I was like, this is just how I write. And then I realized that it was not only essential for my well-being, but it was also essential for the kids listening to me. Like, this is what they need. This is what we need as a community. We need people who make good music and are proud of themselves. You know what I mean? And one does not compromise the other. Like, there has to be a full package. We're tired of sacrificing representation for good art and vice versa.
Right.
You know.
Final question then, what is one of the best reactions you had to your music?
In my show in New York, Baz Luhrmann came to the show, and that was pretty fucking sick. That was just, and he was just like, "It's a great show," and I was like, "Thanks, dude! Like, fuck yeah!" Like, that was pretty cool.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Michaela, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.